it's not something nice to do. It is, a foundational aspect of how a modern business needs to do. This is not something that we only do because of our brand heritage, because of what we stand for. No, if we want to survive as a company with production in Europe in a very tough business climate, then we need to connect it very tangibly also within the organization to this is what you're going to get out of it. This is, the opportunity.
Welcome to Going Circular Pays Off, the podcast where real business leaders prove that sustainability is profit. I'm Sandra Horlings from InnoBoost, supporting businesses around the globe going circular. I'm here together with my colleague Christian Krijnhagen. Today, let's dive into stories of companies cutting waste, restoring resources and thriving while doing it. No fluff, just actionable lessons from those who have been there. So you can skip the mistakes and scale the wins. And yes, I've got expert co-pilots joining me along the way. So let's get started. Today, I'd like you to meet Electrolux, the 100-plus-year-old Swedish brand that helped pioneer the modern refrigerator and now powers everything from home kitchens to Michelin-starred restaurants and even the International Space Station with its appliances. But they're not just selling fridges, ovens or vacuum cleaners. They are redefining what it means to be a sustainability leader. Today we're diving into their circular revolution, making new fridges from old ones and proving that circularity isn't just possible, it's profitable. With 60 million appliances sold annually, you can imagine the shift if they turn to circular designs, because it could divert thousands of tons of waste if Electrolux cracks the code. First, let me introduce my co-pilot for today, Christian Krijnhagen.
Hi, Sandra.
Christian, you talk to many European manufacturers about going circular. In these conversations, do you see one overarching challenge? If so, which?
Yes, for sure. If you look at the EU manufacturings, they're all talking about resilience of their supply chain. So how can we cope with risk, getting our resources, not only now in the short term, but also in the future.
Okay, well, let's see if supply chain resilience is also a topic for Rose. Our guest today is Rose Vanhecke, Sustainability Director at Electrolux, who's turning ambition into action. Under her leadership, Electrolux just launched the world's first fridge with 70% recycled plastic inside, made from old fridges. And they set a 2030 target of 35% recycled, not only plastics across all products, but also steel. Rose, welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here.
As a sustainability director, you are not just ticking boxes. At Electrolux, you are redesigning products. You are redesigning supply chains and even managing consumer expectations. So could you tell us, why is this your top priority right now? Is it regulations, sourcing autonomy, supply chain resilience, as we heard from Christian, the business model, or something else?
I would say yes to all of the above. No, I think sustainability for us has been something we have been doing from the very start. I mean, you've mentioned we are selling refrigerators, selling home appliances, and literally our founder invented the domestic vacuum cleaner with kind of an ambition to empower women, empower generation to make life easier. So I think that's kind of making a contribution to society has always been the core to what we do. We have been also, I think, from a strategic point of view, very early on with our external commitments when it comes to sustainability. We have seen when it comes to maybe not per se always resilience of the supply chain, but at least resilience of our business partners, that this is something that is appreciated. It builds trust. It builds, relevance in the business relations, because a lot of the relationships that we have are strategic partners. Yes, we sell our own products, but we mainly sell via kitchen partners, kitchen manufacturers, electric retailers, and they don't want to have a partner that goes up and down. They want to have somebody that is reliable, somebody that is trustworthy, and we also see sustainability as a counter pillar for that relationship. Then if we also think about it, we're not in the fast-moving consumer goods business. We sell products that you bring into your house, and they're going to stay there for a very, very long time. And to your point, it's also, in a way, it's a luxury good, but we are making life better. I mean, we are giving you a dishwasher, so you don't have to clean by hand. We're giving you a washing machine, so you don't have to clean by hand. So you usually will buy one product and you want it to work. So what we put into the product, how that product then performs, is meaningful to a lot of people. And The key focus of that, and it goes a little bit beyond circularity, is then the impact that that product has as a consumer home, because 85% actually is connected to the energy use. Secondary to that, it is what we put in the product, the materials, the reliability, repairability. So fundamentally, to what we put on the market, what we put on the planet, is sustainability.
Let's talk about the fridge project, in where you say we make new fridges from old ones, basically. When was the first moment that you were thinking, wow, this actually might work, that we try to close the loop of bringing old end-of-life products again to rebirth and a new life? Could you go back to that moment in where you say, yeah, there was a result, a consumer reaction, a colleague saying, wow, Rose, this sounds like a project that can fly?
It's a very good question, because I think as many aha moments, there were also a lot of oh no moments. So happy to pick out a good one. It's when we were finally coming to a type of technical solution that could make sense. But then we saw that from an aesthetic point of view, this recycled material, it wasn't white. Because obviously, you know, the compounds that you put in, the source is a little bit, not per se impure, but you have different types of materials, different types of old fridges. And we were getting some grayish, beige materials. So we were like, ooh, but every fridge today is white, right? So what are consumers going to think about it? And then we put it to the test. And what came out is that not only consumers were actually happily surprised about it, because they were like, oh, I'm happy this is not the hospital white. And even before it was, way before I think beige is trendy, and I think now everybody's house is a bit beige, they were like, oh, this is very, you know, something new. When we then later also explained that the reason why it was a little bit off-white was because of the sourcing of recycled plastics, that's when people really were like, oh, I don't only like it, I also want it. And I think that was the clear aha moment around, I think, 3 to 4 years into the development already, that we were like, this actually can work, you know? This is something that maybe people weren't waiting for, but people are happy about.
Within this fridge project, you're not just closing the loop, eh? I understand you're upgrading and discarded plastics into a higher value product. And about 70% is recycled, is that true?
Yes.
That means that 30% isn't. And then my question is, at which point does the shift from reducing waste to raising it or cleaning the loop? And the other question is, how do you measure success? So in tons diverted, carbon saved, or consumer preference, like you mentioned?
I think when we started the project, there wasn't a clear ROI, to be honest. We have some advanced technology teams that get the freedom to come up with crazy, fun, sustainable ideas and say, let's trial something out. I think today the success of the project is measured in consumer satisfaction, yes, but also sales. So very clearly, I mean, this is not for us a side story. This is not for us a sustainability gimmick or a pilot or a niche product. We will this year incorporate this recycled inner liner in, if we get it right, every single built-in refrigerator that we are producing in our factory in Italy. So this is kind of a new way of doing business. We've invested in the tooling, it is in place, it is accepted on the market. So I think the success is just for us to keep doing it long term and actually integrate it as a normal component.
Sounds like it's a culture.
Yeah, exactly.
So maybe we can go back to before that aha moment, when consumers said, I like the beige and not the hospital white fridges. Someone said, hey, we can put recycled plastics in those fridges. What was the trigger to do that?
We have to go all the way back to 2017, so quite early days. Also, if you think about, integrating recycled materials or plastics into, bigger appliances. The starting point was what we would call our product care team, which is basically a team that then is responsible for the product after it's launched. And they're constantly looking for opportunities to improve the product. Quality, cost, suppliers, things like that. And it was actually that team, not per se the sustainability team, that said, hey, we might have found another alternative for a material, and we want to look into recycled materials. Everybody obviously was very excited because we thought we are a sustainability leader. This is something that we should do. But we also know from the beginning it would be quite challenging because, as I said, it was very early days. It wasn't done before. At the time, I don't think there were a lot of other players who had incorporated recycled plastics into their products. And on top of that, we are also choosing a product, a fridge, where there are a lot of rules when it comes to, for example, food contact. So there was no protocol available on can you even, touch food with recycled plastics. And to your point, Christian, that's also why we ended up with 70%, because the way we had to go, not per se around it, but develop our own protocol is because we did still need, and we do so today, a virgin layer, a type of thermofill of virgin material in between the recycled plastic inner liner and between the food to protect the quality and the safety of the food. And the 70% that we set is also quite cautious. We are delivering a bit more than 70%, but we obviously, especially I think these days when it comes to green claims and stuff like that, we need to be quite mindful on what we claim. We will also always communicate that the recycled inner liner is made out of 70% recycled plastics, but the total fridge, if you consider the weight, is 15%. So it's also good to kind of be transparent about that. And that is something we also already did from the start.
And which stakeholders did you need to convince, and which arguments did you have to provide during this whole journey?
So I think in the beginning, as I said, it was more of a product line R&D type of conversation. Okay, let's explore alternatives. When we then found the material, but it wasn't looking great, as I said. It was also, let's get design involved. At that time, I think people were excited, but it was like, let's just see what happens. I think the moment we started with this aha moment is, okay, consumers also like this. This is sellable. So that's when the business gets involved. That's when we start discussing scale. That's when we start discussing opportunity. We actually have it as a mandatory part of bigger launches, that there is consumer testing as part of the development. So if we don't reach specific preference, we need to, take a few steps back and revise the product. So that was mandatory. But then something we also always do, because again, a lot of our products, especially for these built-in refrigerators, goes via kitchen specialists, electric retailers. We also ask them saying, hey guys, what do you think? And as you can imagine, I know you guys also have a beautiful refurbished or recycled materials kitchen here. There are some players out there also from a business point of view, especially if you look at design studios, etc., that have been working with recycled or better materials. And for them, there was also something nice, saying, hey, we are promoting this, nice, more sustainable kitchen materials. This is now the new fridge from Electrolux that fits into it. So I think once we got the consumer acceptance, once we got the trade acceptance, I mean, we are, a big business, that's when things obviously go quicker. I think over time, the project has been halted a few times because of the cost, but in the end, that also was overcome. And I think especially at the starting point, the business was willing to take a small surplus on that as well.
And if you look a little bit more on the macro level, the Swedish circular economy is quite advanced. But about 90%, if I'm correct, of Electrolux sales are outside Scandinavia. How do you adapt those Swedish solutions for markets that don't have the infrastructure or the mindset or the, let's say, enablers or capabilities in place?
Well, I think on one hand, we have the brand. So people buy something that stands for something. And the Swedish brand works also outside of Sweden. So that's one thing. I think we are also quite lucky that we're part of the EU. So a lot of the rules that apply to Sweden, especially when it comes to circularity, to e-waste and things like that, are not just for Sweden. They are across the whole of Europe. Some countries like France, for example, actually go beyond Sweden when it comes to requirements, which is then also a challenge from us. And okay, where do we find the balance and how do you still ensure it's an open market? So I think we try to pioneer where we can, due to what we stand for as a brand, but often also the pace is defined on what we see is coming from regulation, and that is often not a Swedish thing to do, but a European activity. If you look at other regions, I mean, Australia is also very, very regulated, but others, maybe in Asia, Latin America, are not. And there we do have learnings that we, on circular, like take-back schemes and things like that, which are regulated in Europe, not yet there, that we are offering then on those markets. So I think it's, I think Sweden is key, but I think what Europe sets as a standard is even more important for us.
If you go back inside in the organization, what was the key argument to convince the business this is the value going circular?
I think we have been lucky, if I might maybe take it back 5 years ago, that sustainability was one of our brand pillars, saying we want our products to stand for sustainability. We want our business to be recognized as a sustainable leader. We have sustainability in our mission, we have sustainability in our purpose, we have sustainability in our strategic drivers. So I think the organization as such had already accepted that. I think actually our Electrolux already in 92 had an environmental policy. In 99, we were part of the Dow Jones Index. We set our first climate targets in the early 2000s. So I don't think there was a lot of convincing to do. I think now the convincing is let's stay on that course because it is becoming more and more difficult. How we ensure that there is still focus is again to link it to consumer interest, consumer demand, strategic drivers. And I think when it comes to circularity, I spoke about recycled plastics. That is key. There is an interest from the consumer to buy this, but only if all the other stuff are there. A dishwasher needs to clean, an oven needs to make tasty food. Where I think circularity has even higher potential today when it comes to our products is the durability of the product. Again, consumers want to invest in an appliance, but they don't have an abundance of money to invest. So you want value for your money. You want a product, as I said, that is energy efficient, but you want also a product that has high quality, that is not breaking down, and that if it's breaking down, it's easy to repair. So I think at the moment, when it comes to circularity, and it might not sound like something, sexy and very, very complicated, that notion of offering towards the expectation of consumer that your product is going to last, I think is where we are focusing a lot. And that is also something we will see as a, I think, more concrete definition of what maybe sustainability could mean for our brands moving forward.
But if you say we try to make new fridges from old ones, I try to make it small, but I know it's been a long route getting there. Has something also changed in the way that you offer it to consumers? So how, for instance, not only saying it's beige, it's not only trendy, there's a rationale behind it because it's recycled plastics, but how are you promoting, for instance, that you get these fridges back end of use, not necessarily end of life? Has something changed in the business model there as well? That you take care of how do you get these products back to you?
So if we look again at these recycled inner liners, there is a loop, but we don't own the loop fully. Meaning we get our source materials from our supplier, which is Coolrec, which is actually based here in the Netherlands, I think also in Belgium and France. And they take it from shredded, disregarded fridges. But it could be an Electrolux fridge, it could be an AG fridge, it could also be a competitor brand. We close the loop also for, other brands. At the end of life, our products, hopefully after a very, very, very long time, will also end up maybe at a recycling station. We are not particularly then targeting those fridges to be picked up. We are obviously, ensuring, first of all, that before the products get discarded, they first get repaired if possible. But we are also trying to, maybe it's not fully closing the loop, but at least make the loop easier. So we have something called Design for Recyclability guidelines, where I think around 3-4 years ago, we did a huge collaboration with Stena, which is a big recycling partner in Sweden, where we literally said, okay, there are rules on how recyclable our products need to be. And those are often linked to theoretical recycling rates from specific materials, 80%, 70%, etc. Oh, it's plastic, recyclable. Oh, it's this type of insulation foam, not recyclable, done. But then when you go to the recycling station, like the people who are actually doing the work, and you ask them, okay, this fridge, 80%, tell us. They're like, oh, but I'm sorry, you have here a drawer where this silver metal line is glued on your glass shelf. There is no value for us to put that, outside of each other because, glass and metal is I wouldn't dare calling it worthless here in a circular podcast, but there is no incentive for us to spread it. The amount of work is too high. So we will just then burn those pieces of materials, even if in theory they are recyclable. So then we have to think about, okay, but instead of gluing them, we screw them. And then it's kind of easy for the recycling person to actually, separate them and allow that they have the proper waste stream. So even if it's not a 100% closed loop, we are trying in the pieces that we own, the pieces that we can influence, ease up the loop and ensure that things are done in a better way.
So, Rose, if you look at the whole supply chain, including the partners, so including the retail distribution, you said, okay, we don't manage the whole loop, but where are your control points? Where do you see, okay, there we can influence, there we can push, maybe accelerate, or maybe trigger also partners to take the next step in this value chain towards getting more circular?
We have external commitments. I mean, we have our science-based targets, and in our scope 3, we include, as we said, product use because that's the key thing, but we also include logistics, we include material footprint. So we are externally committing to making parts of our supply chain better. Maybe a specific example is on this 35% recycled materials target that we have. It is the first step, because what is now included is the material that we buy directly as raw materials that we put in our own production. And there actually we can have, scalable conversations with our suppliers saying, hey, this is our target. It goes beyond what regulation is requiring, but this is a minimum expectation or a minimum, MVP on what we need to set in the contract when you are providing this material to us. It does become more difficult if we talk about subcomponents. So, for example, electronics. We don't buy every wire separately. We buy the electronic as a sub-module, you can say. And having to go down there into what is every single piece made of, and especially what is the recycled content in there, is more tricky. Obviously, we have rules when it comes to, chemicals, responsible sourcing, human rights, due diligence. So we need to make sure that where the electronics come from have gotten through a process. But having proper circularity commitments and requirements there, we are not there. We are having conversations, we are trying, but I think also if you talk about supply chain, resilience, electronics, some markets are more easy to influence, other also are a little bit more demand and availability sensitive. So we are trying to focus on what is in our immediate power and do those rights with then the idea to kind of expand it as we move along.
In the circular economy, we try to identify what is your minimal viable ecosystem that you can make the transition with. And you mentioned some of your suppliers, but I think you are also learning together with your suppliers. How are you managing that team of partners, as you will, in your ecosystem to really raise the bar together?
So we have a sourcing team and we have a responsible sourcing team, and they are working very closely together. We have sustainability as a definition on who we are as a brand, but also as a corporate identity. And whenever we talk with suppliers, new suppliers, especially strategic suppliers, they know that. Why? Also because we ask them to report on CDP. So that is not per se on circularity, but we ask them to be transparent about their carbon emissions, their reporting, disclosure. We also ask all of them that what we have as, for example, a code of conduct, workplace policy, workplace directive, they need to have as a minimum within their production. So I think when it comes to, again, climate, when it comes to social sustainability, we are quite far progressed with those suppliers. I think circularity at the moment is an opportunity case by case. We have a project, we could include it, let's find the right supplier, let's see if we can get it recycled. On top of then our long-term strategy that yes, by 2030, we have to have the commitment that 35% is recycled. And I think here when you talk about partners, I've been talking about plastic before. I think steel for us is also a big one. As I said, the 35% is on plastics and steel. Why those two? If you look at the total weight of the products that we have and the impact, those are by far the biggest contributors in terms of material. So that's why we start there. Steel, we have made some preliminary contracts with some suppliers to go more towards, greener steel, because they also then need commitments from bigger players like us to say we can invest in setting this up.
What are for you the key learnings to engage with other companies?
I think it's also about not overcomplicating it. What we have done, I think, also in the past is saying, okay, you have the sourcing team, They have the strategic relationships with the partners. And then you had the sustainability team on top, who would then, on top of what the sourcing team was asking, say like, oh, but you also have to do this, and we also have to do this, and we have also that. And then in the end, even internally, and this is just a few cases, our sourcing team would say, but it's okay to the partner. Don't listen to the sustainability team. Just please focus on this because this is more important. So make sure that the requirements of what you want your partners to do is aligned internally. Maybe it's a compromise because maybe you can't do all of the 10 things that you want to do, but there's 3 that you can start by doing properly. And then from an internal point of view, externally put that through as a team. There's one Electrolux, there's one, key account, there's one supplier, and we need to have one represented voice. I think that is super important. I think also it's a little bit like cheating, obviously, but I think legislation is evolving. We often have more visibility or at least more knowledge on what's coming. Use that to also prepare your supplying partners. Joint preparation on what is by default going to come is something that you can leverage to also start having conversations. And then I think for us as Electrolux, as we have been a leader, as we also perceived as a leader, we also have a very credible voice in those conversations. And we even see that some of our partners come to us and say like, you guys must be prepared. Have you heard something? Are you doing more? So that's, I think, also, a competitive and a strategic strength that we then can use.
Back to the key question of this podcast. Is there a business case for going circular?
I definitely think there's a business case. I think the business case is more difficult than it was some years ago. I think the main reason for that is that for us, a business case is linked to consumer demand. I think quite a few years ago, consumer demand had sustainability as an actual outcome high on the list. I think consumers still appreciate it. I think consumers still expect it. But the willingness to pay extra for it, we see at least in our business, is less than it was before. On the other hand, if you can link it to other needs, then I think the business case is high. As I mentioned, repairability, durability, think about upgradability. We have been talking about how do we make our products last longer. We are now as a business talking about how do we actually also make our products better? How do we offer or sell new programs? So you have, a personalized laundry or a strong maintenance cycle and things like that. So the relationship that you have with your products, how can we, use maybe circularity to also make it better?
And what is then next for the business?
The biggest opportunity for our business for circularity is to link it to the ecosystem. What does it mean to have an appliance? Services. We know consumers a lot of times don't repair their products, not because it's not repairable, because then they think like, I have to call somebody and then I have to wait for that person to come and my laundry is piling up and I have a dinner that I need to prepare.
And it's going to be expensive.
And it's going to be expensive and I'll just buy a new one. That is completely the wrong way to go, right? And as a business, we can offer things like fixed price repair. Regardless what goes wrong, we will be there. This is the maximum price. We will do it. Extended warranties, taking out the hassle and the thinking for the consumer. That is going to be a big thing. I think legislation also there is going to help. And then, as I said, how can we move it from not just doing the basics, making your product last, but also making them better? There is so much connectivity, opportunities, AIs. How can we also use that to improve and keep improving? And that then becomes over time the minimum, expectation from consumers, which I think will be great.
If you go back to this, all these projects that you run, what is the biggest profit to be proud of that you created? Are you proud of the profit that you created?
Definitely, because it's blood, sweat, and tears, right? And I think we are lucky within the organization that we are, that the tears are allowed. There is some room for trial and error. I think, as a lot of companies, there is pressure on costs. But what is good to see that things like, for example, these recycled inner liners, they are so embedded in the business now that even the product lines are saying, okay, maybe there is additional cost for us, but this is something that we are going to keep. this is something that is part of our offering. And I think that is kind of the biggest thing to be proud of, that it's not me having to defend this, but that it's the others who maybe don't have sustainability that high on the agenda that are going in the same direction.
Is there also financial profits?
Yes. So, I mean, if we look at a few concrete examples, I think we also have a big focus on green financing. So within, the external targets that we set, within our investments, we make commitments on, for example, energy efficiency within our products. And because of that, we can then get better loans. I think there is also even a project in place in Brazil where we work with banks that then also our suppliers get some better loans. So I think that's a very tangible financial profit because, the interest we need to pay on the loan, if we deliver on sustainability commitments, is better. I think if we make it very black and white, you also see financial gains when it comes to operations. Cost efficiency, because we are electrifying. We are reducing variable costs. We are reducing sometimes, price volatility because we start installing our own solar panels instead of buying these power purchase agreements. So there are very concrete examples also. And then, as I said, I think, maybe not as spelled out that clearly, but I think the ROI of building a brand that consumers know this is, a product from a brand that lasts. This is a product that will guide me towards the best use of my product when I have it. And if something goes wrong, we'll figure out all the rest. I think it's hard to put a number on that, but I think that definitely counts for something as well.
So, all in all, if you could have done one thing differently, what would it be?
I think I would start earlier in sustainability. No, I think if I would have done something differently, I think it would be maybe to also be even more bold in the organization. I think I now in my role for this role a year. Before I was working sustainability 3-4 years, and it was always considered as this is a nice thing to do for us. But I think what we are now really trying to do is, no, it is actually foundational to us operating as a business. We have strategic drivers, and sustainability is a key element of that. I mean, I gave some examples now just on the financial, advantages, and it's not something nice to do. It is, a foundational aspect of how a modern business needs to do it. This is not something that we only do because of our brand heritage, because of what we stand for. No, if we want to survive as a company with production in Europe in a very tough business climate, then we need to connect it very tangibly also within the organization to this is what you're going to get out of it. This is, the opportunity. And I think that is something that we are doing now, but we potentially could have started doing also earlier.
So Rose, you've given us the blueprint, how to turn old fridges into new ones, skepticism into demand, and nice to have sustainability into core business. Thank you for your raw insights, for your boldness, and for proving that circularity isn't just possible, it's profitable, and it's future-proofing your business, if I listen to you. And a big thank you to you, Christian, for sharing the right questioning and keeping us on track and bringing in that hot topic of supply chain resilience. This has been Going Circular Pays Off, the podcast uncovering the business case for circularity. I'm Sandra Horlings, and today we explored Electrolux journey with Rose Vanhecke alongside my co-pilot Christian Kraaienhagen. If this episode sparked ideas, put them into action. Visit inneboost.com for tools to make circularity work for you. Share this with your network because circularity keeps our world livable and thriving and business blooming, creating profit to be proud of.